Hi everyone, welcome to week 3 of our Composition 1 class. This week you are going to plan and write a complete draft of Writing Project 1. Hopefully this is an enjoyable process for you. It's something that you're getting to write about aspects of your life, and I find that a lot of people enjoy that. It's nice to be able to talk about experiences that are meaningful to you. And keep in mind that you have already done quite a bit of writing for this project already. We've done a fair amount of brainstorming and planning and things that you can use to help you write the draft. You can also take a look at the Student Success Gallery for examples of how previous students have approached this project as well. And just as a kind of reminder here, it's a good idea to click through all of the screens, all of the pages in our weekly modules at the beginning of the week, just so you have a good idea of what you need to get done and how you should manage your time. Your first task for this week is some reading from your textbook. I would like you to read the chapters on drafting, describing, dialogue, and designing text. The first 3 chapters are going to help you get your stories down and integrate descriptions and dialogue into them. I'd like you to pay particular attention to the sections on detail, vantage point, and rhetorical situation. And then also review the info about how to paragraph and punctuate dialogue. The last chapter is going to give you some guidance on designing your document. And before you actually start drafting the project, I'm going to have you do a little bit more planning and some considering of what your rhetorical situation is. To begin, I would review the earlier pre-writing that you have done. I think that will be a good refresher on some of the thoughts that you've already had. Then you're going to write out responses to the following prompts. First, we have a section on audience, purpose, and stance. Who is your audience? Your class is going to be part of your audience, but there may be other people that you kind of want to reach out to, other people you would like to communicate with. How will they react to your stories, and what will they need to know, and what will keep them interested? What stance do you want to take as the narrator? Stance is often related to tone as well. Do you want to be funny, ironic, playful, critical, thoughtful, contemplative, reflective? Any number of things. It kind of depends on what you're trying to convey. And then what's your overall purpose for sharing your stories? What are you trying to inform your readers about? What do you want them to know about you after they finish reading your essay? Next, we have a section on genre. Your genre is a narrative collage. How many vignettes do you want to include? Remember, you need to have at least 2. 2 is the minimum. I kind of recommend having at least 3, really. And in what order should those vignettes be in? Should you weave the stories in and out like a soap opera does, or should you tell one story, finish it, and then move on to the next? What verb tense are you going to use in each vignette? Present tense, so that readers can feel like they are in the moment, feel a sense of immediacy, or past tense. I do recommend that you try to be consistent with your verb tenses, however. What can you do in your opening sentences to engage your readers and make them want to keep reading? You could potentially begin in the middle of the story, throw the reader right into the action. You could potentially begin with some dialogue to grab their attention. You could potentially begin your story with the ending. And those are just a few ideas. There are plenty of other things you can do to make your story engaging. And then how can you end your collage? Should you frame the collage by referring back to something from the beginning? Are you going to leave your reader with something to ponder or reflect on? Are you going to reflect on the meaning of your stories? And can you do so without sounding like you are, sort of pasting on a moral at the end? The next section is on media and design. I'd like you to, think about how you are going to visually cue the readers that one vignette is ending and another is beginning. You could consider using headings. You could consider using, maybe asterisks or ellipses. There are different ways that you can help show your reader when you're kind of shifting gears in your narrative collage. You should think about spacing. You should think about font a little bit. And then also consider adding photos or other sorts of visuals. And then finally, getting help. What might you need help with in creating your collage? Describing scenes, using dialogue, drafting, revising, and so on. Looking at the brief menu at the front of your textbook and at the fuller table of contents, what 2 chapters or sections of the book might serve as good resources for you as you work on your project? And I'd like you to identify those chapters or sections and explain why you chose them. And that is task 3.2. Next, you're going to actually write your draft. Using the resources available to you, you are going to write a draft of Writing Project 1. You should go back to the pre-writing that you've done. You should reread the assignment description. You should take a look at the samples that we've looked at. You should also look at the Student Success Gallery. All of these things will help you better write a good first draft of this project. In task 3.4, you're going to decide on a format and your design. As you're drafting, remember that for this assignment, the format/design, the look of the document on the page is up to you. So you get to choose the font, the typeface, the line spacing, whatever works best for you. You may even choose to include images in your document if you want. As you're deciding on matters of design, think back to the sample collages you read last week. Some used extra space between vignettes to cue their readers to let them know that a new vignette was starting. Some use asterisks centered on the page. Sometimes writers of collages use headings or numbers or pictures to separate their vignettes. All of those things are design choices. Sometimes students also experiment with color or font style. For instance, a writer might tell one story in regular font and then use italics to visually distinguish the next vignette. Again, those sorts of decisions are up to you. But make sure that you are keeping in mind your audience. If you go too crazy with different fonts and colors, readers might become confused or annoyed. As you work on your draft, consider experimenting a little bit. Often, it's helpful as you draft to experiment with your writing, just for the fun of it, just to see what happens. Maybe you could convert a section of your draft entirely to dialogue, or change from past tense to present, or start at the end of a story and work back to the beginning, or slow down and enlarge or zoom in on a scene by bringing every moment to life. Many of the vignettes you read in Task 2.6 were written by students who experimented with their writing. For example, Brian Y. decided to slow down and enlarge just one line from his original draft. That line was, "And then we put on our gas masks." When he slowed down and tried to imagine every detail of putting on the gas masks, he came up with the following. Brian Y. liked what he came up with during his experimentation and decided to keep it in his final draft. Maybe you'll experiment and you won't like what comes of it, and that's perfectly fine. But you could also stumble upon something that's pretty neat. In task 3.6, you are going to post to the discussion board. This week, you're only going to have one post due. It is due by Sunday at 11:59, and I'd like you to post your draft of Project 1 and respond to the questions below. When posting your draft, you can copy and paste it into the text box, or you can attach a docx file. At the top of the text box, I'd like you to make a few notes in response to the following. What are you struggling with in your draft? What's going well for you? What specifically do you want feedback on? How did you experiment in your drafting, and why did you do this? Did you like your experiment and keep it in your current draft? Why or why not? You don't have any other posts to make this week. Next week, you'll be reading and peer reviewing your classmates' drafts. We'll go ahead and move on to our last page here, which is submitting some of your weekly work. You should submit all of the writing that you produced in response to task 3.2, as well as the draft you wrote for task 3.3. Don't be confused by this. You are submitting your rough draft to two different places. You're posting it in the discussion board for your peers, but then you're also submitting it here, which is where I will look at it and potentially give you some feedback if I notice any issues with the draft that you've submitted. And that is due Sunday, February 7th by 11:59 p.m. I think that pretty well covers everything for now. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know.